Hello, my dear friends. My name is Helen. I'm 76 years old and I come from the warm and welcoming town of Santa Rita, right in the heart of Minas Gerais. Today, I want to share my story with you, a journey full of challenges, love, and resilience. But first, I'd love to know where you're watching this video from. Please leave a comment and don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel so you can follow every detail of this journey that I hold so close to my heart. I was born and raised in a time when family traditions were very strong. Back in the 1970s in Santa Rita, it was common for parents to have many children since the idea was to fill the home with joy, laughter, and above all, hard work. However, from a very young age, I had a different dream. I wanted to have just one child. I always believed that with just one, I could pour all my love and care into that special little person. The quality of affection and attention mattered more to me than the number of bonds we had. When the long-awaited day finally came and my son arrived into the world, I felt all my dreams coming true. I clearly remember that first moment, the soft cry of the baby, the comforting warmth of his tiny fingers holding mine, and the certainty that in that instant I had received the greatest gift life could offer me. Every day by his side was a celebration. Each smile, each discovery felt like a new light shining in my heart. I would spend hours rocking him, singing to him, and imagining a future full of possibilities. Back then, the world around me felt full of hope and simplicity. The streets of Santa Rita bore witness to childhood games, lazy afternoons, and heartfelt gatherings with neighbors and friends. I devoted myself entirely to my son, nurturing him with the best of my soul and teaching him the values I've always considered essential: honesty, respect, and love for others. My wish was for him to grow up knowing that no matter what challenges life might bring, he would always have the warmth of my love. But life, my dear ones, has its surprises. Years later, in the blink of an eye, a lovely little girl came into the world. She wasn't planned, and I confess that at first this stirred up a whirlwind of emotions. In the midst of anxiety and the fear of losing the focus I had on my son, I held the little one with trembling hands, and in doing so, I felt something I never imagined. A love so deep that it seemed to flood every corner of my being. Somehow her arrival didn't diminish the affection I had for my firstborn. On the contrary, my heart expanded to embrace this new life with the same intensity and tenderness. Amid this routine of dedication and care, unexpectedly, one of those turning points happened. Just when I thought my life revolved around a single perfect storyline, I discovered I was pregnant again. The feeling was a blend of surprise, apprehension, and a curious hope. I wondered, how is it possible to love two lives so intensely? Will my heart, so accustomed to pouring all its affection on one, have room for this new soul? These doubts, which soon faded away, gave way to a certainty that would change the course of my existence. However, since not everything is perfect, I realized that this change in my family's makeup began to affect the dynamics I had so carefully built. My son, who had long been the center of all my love, started to show signs of distance. Perhaps he felt deep down that the space that had once been solely his was now shared. Or maybe the surprise and change had stirred feelings in him that were difficult to understand at his age. I saw day by day a gaze growing more distant, a silence that spoke volumes, and my mother's heart ached at the thought that even unintentionally, I might be losing a piece of that precious bond we had built together. Those early years were filled with unforgettable moments. Sunny days playing in the backyard, afternoons of stories told in the soft light of dusk, and quiet nights where I dreamed of a better future for my little ones. Even amidst the uncertainties that surfaced, I never stopped believing that a mother's love is infinite and capable of multiplying. I learned that the heart knows no limits when it comes to love, and that no matter how life surprises us, it always offers valuable lessons to those willing to see with a compassionate eye. Life with two children taught me to face unexpected challenges, to rethink plans, and to rediscover the strength within each of us. In the eyes of my neighbors, I was that determined mother facing the world with a smile, even when the winds of change blew fiercely. But in the quiet moments of my prayers and thoughts, I wondered if I was doing enough, if the love I shared could heal the small wounds slowly opening between my son and me. Before we move on to the next chapters of this story, I want to thank each of you for being here, listening with an open heart. Always remember to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and most importantly, share your stories with me, because I know we are all, in one way or another, on a journey of overcoming and learning. As the years passed, the routine in our humble home in Santa Rita began to reveal the first cracks in the harmony I had long dreamed of. Sunny days filled with hope gave way to a reality where time seemed to bring a shadow of anguish and restlessness. In that era of the 1970s, when simplicity and faith were our greatest treasures, I already sensed that changes were coming, and my mother's heart felt the weight of a fate I never imagined I would have to bear. The smile of my firstborn, which once lit up every corner of my being, slowly began to fade. I watched with a mother's vigilant eyes as he grew more distant. It wasn't just youthful rebellion. It was a silent drifting away that made me wonder if, somehow, the arrival of my daughter, so unexpected and surely so blessed, had changed the dynamic I had fought so hard to build. The look that once said to me, "Mommy, I love you," was replaced by cold silence, and every word I spoke to him seemed to fall on ears no longer willing to listen. As I struggled with this new reality, another painful trial appeared in my life. My little one, who came as a surprise but quickly found her place in my heart, began to show signs of a silent illness. At first, there were just a few episodes of high fever, unexplained fatigue. With the faith and determination of someone who never gives up on their most precious treasure, I searched for remedies and prayers for the sickness that seemed to grow worse by the day. In those days, medicine was still far from the advancements we know today. Resources were limited, and for many families like mine, access to quality treatment was a distant dream. My husband, who had once shared with me dreams of a family filled with love, had already left me alone, making the burden even heavier. Without his support, and with the financial struggles mounting with every new bill, I found myself fighting on two fronts: caring for my son, who was becoming increasingly withdrawn, and trying to save my daughter's life, whose fragile smile was fading along with the hope for a future free from pain. Each visit to the doctor brought a mix of anguish and helplessness. I remembered the days when the streets of Santa Rita were filled with innocent joy, and now I saw those same streets as silent witnesses to my despair. The recommended treatments were expensive, and I could barely scrape together the money needed to buy the medications that could at least ease some of my little girl's suffering. The nights were long, and I spent hours praying, asking God to give me strength to face the whirlwind of emotions threatening to overwhelm me. The contrast was cruel. While I tried to keep alive the flame of unconditional love for both children, my eldest son, increasingly absorbed in his own feelings, was drifting away. At that moment, I didn't understand if the distance was due to jealousy, misunderstanding, or even an internal change that I couldn't keep up with. What I knew, with a heavy heart, was that this distance only increased the loneliness consuming me. It was as if, in some inexplicable way, the boy I had loved with all my heart was beginning to harbor a silent resentment, a wound that deepened with every glance and every unspoken word. My daughter's illness worsened with each passing month, and every new symptom made me feel like time was stealing the chance to see her smile bloom again. On a rainy afternoon, when the weather outside matched the sadness flooding my home, I received the news that would change my life forever. The doctors, with sorrowful expressions, explained that despite all efforts, the disease had relentlessly progressed, and that I should prepare for a farewell I never wanted to confront. The weight of those words echoed deep within my soul, and in that moment, I felt my world crumble. The farewell was filled with overwhelming sadness. I was by her side, holding her hand while time seemed to slow, allowing each tear to become a painful goodbye. The room, dimly lit by a single lamp, witnessed the final struggle between a mother's unconditional love and the merciless cruelty of a disease that spared not even the weakest. I whispered words of comfort, even though I knew they could not heal the emptiness settling in my chest. Amid this scene of pain, the silence of the house became deafening, reminding me of what was and what would never be again. With the passing of my daughter, the home that once thrived with the presence of two beloved souls was filled with an almost palpable silence. The void she left behind was immense, and I found myself torn between memories of joyful times and the harsh reality of her absence. At the same time, the distance growing between me and my eldest son followed a painful rhythm. Every day when I returned home, I searched his eyes for a sign of affection, a gesture that would make me believe that despite everything, the unbreakable bond between mother and child still endured. But day after day, that connection seemed to unravel, leaving me with the bitter feeling of having lost what I cherished most. I often wondered if my son's withdrawal was a natural reaction to the changes brought by my daughter's arrival, or if there was something deeper, a wound that might never heal. The sense of betrayal. Not a betrayal of love, but a breaking of bonds that time seemed to have worn away, became an almost unbearable pain. The boy who once filled my days with joy was now becoming a reflection of a reality I struggled to accept. Amid this turmoil, I held on to the hope that even in such pain, the love I had for him could one day find its way back into our shared life. The context of the 1970s, with all its limitations and challenges, made every obstacle feel even greater. Due to a lack of resources, the absence of adequate family support, and the very culture of that time, I felt an overwhelming sense of isolation. I found myself alone, torn between the responsibility of honoring my daughter's memory and the struggle to understand the distance from a son who had once been my pride. Each visit to the doctor, each failed treatment served as a bitter reminder that no matter how hard I tried, life moved relentlessly forward, taking with it those I loved most. During this period of anguish, afternoons became long moments of introspection. I wandered through the corners of the house, trying to find answers to the dilemmas that tormented me, while the distant sound of radios played songs that somehow captured the melancholy of that time. The stories told by superheroes took on a new meaning amidst my own pain. I felt shattered. Yet despite the challenges, I believed there had to be a way out. These were burdens I carried with resignation and a strength known only to mothers. Hope, though weakened, stubbornly held on. I clung to every small memory of happy moments, trying to turn pain into a lesson in resilience. The reality of the 1970s, with its hardships and limitations, taught me that even in the face of the greatest adversities, life always holds surprises that can change the course of our existence. During that time, faith was the only certainty that kept me moving forward. I prayed every day, asking God to give me the strength to bear the weight of each loss, to find, even if timidly, a path to reconcile with the son who seemed to be drifting away. The pain of saying goodbye to my daughter turned into a deep silence, but it also opened space for intense reflection on the value of love and family. I knew that despite all the suffering, I had to keep fighting, not just for myself, but also for the memory of those tender moments that once defined our story. It was during this turbulent period, when the silence in the house grew heavier and the echoes of past laughter seemed distant, that the first seed of disappointment took root deep in my soul. The separation from my son and the irreparable loss of my daughter were chapters of a story I never imagined I would live through. Yet, I sought solace in my faith and in the small acts of kindness that still came my way from neighbors, and especially in the memory of happy moments. That was my strength to carry on. Each tear shed, each night spent in vigil reminded me of the value of true love, the kind that despite all hardships remains steadfast and resilient. And so even in the face of despair, I kept moving forward, holding on to the hope that the pain of the past could one day give way to a new beginning where joy would bloom again. Even though it was unexpected, I never thought that after so many years of dedication and unconditional love, the bond that always united me to my son would reach a point where he would turn away from me so coldly and decisively. It was a day of piercing silence when his words, spoken without any hesitation, made me feel as if my very blood had turned to ice. In a gesture I could never have predicted, he declared that he no longer wanted my presence in his life, that I should seek a new path, far from an environment that, according to him, didn't belong to his world. This decision, made abruptly and without room for explanations, represented the greatest betrayal I had ever experienced. Despite all our differences and misunderstandings, I had always believed the maternal bond could never be broken. The moment his words echoed in my ears, an immense void settled inside me. Every memory of the happy moments we had shared seemed to turn into an open wound, and the feeling of abandonment crept in with almost unbearable intensity. I, who had dedicated my life to caring for, loving, and supporting my son, found myself overnight rejected by the very person I had always cherished. It was as if all the love and sacrifices I made over the years were dismissed in the blink of an eye, leaving me lost and directionless with a shattered heart. I was advised to find a new place to live, a shelter that for me represented a fate I had never imagined for a mother who had always fought for her family. Upon arriving at this place, I encountered a scene that at first glance did not convey any sense of warmth. The corridors were silent, and the walls, worn by time, seemed to hold the echoes of past lives, stories of solitude and abandonment. Yet, even in the face of so much uncertainty, something inside me refused to be completely defeated. I knew that despite everything, there was still a flame that could be rekindled, the flame of hope and inner strength. The first few days were especially tough. Every morning was a struggle to get up and face the new reality. I would sit alone reminiscing about the days when the house was full of laughter, when every corner held a piece of our story. But now, familiar faces had been replaced by strangers, and each new day reminded me that time never stops, even if I wished to hold on to the past. The feeling of betrayal was heavy, and loneliness was constant. However, it was in this seemingly barren environment that I began to notice small changes that gradually set me on a path toward reconciliation with myself. Amid the strict routine of the nursing home, where schedules were fixed and activities well organized, I started to find in the small moments of the day signs of genuine affection. An elderly woman with eyes that seemed to understand every tear and every sigh of mine approached me and offered a warm smile. She shared with me her own battles, her losses, and especially the courage she found to keep moving forward. This unexpected friendship became a turning point in my journey, for in her company, I felt I was no longer alone. Each conversation, each exchange of experiences helped ease the pain I carried and reminded me that life, even after the deepest betrayals, can still offer new possibilities. I began to take part in meetings and discussions held at the nursing home, where stories of overcoming challenges were shared with heartfelt sincerity. In those moments, I realized that although the past was filled with losses and disappointments, the present could still be shaped by our choices and attitudes. I allowed myself to be carried away by the words of the other residents, absorbing every lesson, every life teaching that was offered to me with such care. Thus, the environment that at first seemed to be a refuge of solitude gradually transformed into a place where hope quietly blossomed. The healing process was not immediate. There were days when the longing for the comfort of family and the pain from my son's abandonment felt overwhelming. In moments of weakness, I found myself reliving the hurt of that day I was rejected, wondering if all the love and effort I had given over the years had been for nothing. But with every tear I shed, I was also reminded that despite everything, I still had the strength to rise again and find purpose in my own life. It was during this time that I began to appreciate the small victories even more. A friend's smile, a word of encouragement, the simple act of getting out of bed on a difficult morning. One autumn afternoon, while walking through the nursing home courtyard, I noticed a bench where a calm and kind-looking woman was sitting with a book in her hands. Approaching her felt like a gesture that, at that moment, naturally connected us and brought a peace that only the wisdom of life can offer. She told me how her youth was marked by immense challenges and how she had learned that true freedom comes from accepting one's own story with all its scars and lessons. Her words resonated with me in an unexpected way. They felt like a soothing balm for the wounds of my heart. That conversation marked the beginning of a new chapter where I understood that the path to healing involved forgiveness, not just toward others, but especially toward myself. Gradually, I began to rebuild my identity, free from the shadows of the past. My son's betrayal, while still a deep mark in my memory, stopped being the only thing defining who I was. I discovered that self-love, taking care of my emotional well-being, and exploring new horizons were essential to turning that pain into growth. I started dedicating myself to activities that always brought me joy: reading, gardening, and even writing, which became a refuge for expressing everything that simple words couldn't capture. Each new activity was a small victory over the feeling of abandonment, a chance to show myself that life, despite all its hardships, was still beautiful and full of possibilities. In this new beginning, I learned that overcoming doesn't mean forgetting the past, but rather finding the strength to transform it into something that fuels our growth. I reinvented myself, nurturing new friendships and rediscovering the joy of life through small, everyday moments. Although the weight of betrayal never fully disappeared, I learned to carry it as part of my story, a part that, no matter how painful, taught me to cherish every moment of affection and the importance of respecting and caring for myself. Today, looking back, I realized that that period of rejection and loneliness was in fact the catalyst for my rebirth. The asylum, which initially felt like a sad and lonely place, became a space where I learned that true love can be found in unexpected places and that inner strength can flourish even in the toughest situations. With each new day, I move forward with the conviction that even when the world seems to close in around us, there's always a light ready to guide us back to hope. This journey of rebirth is proof that even after the pain of betrayal, it's possible to rebuild one's life with dignity, courage, and above all, self-love. And it is with this message of overcoming that I invite everyone watching this story to reflect on their own ability to reinvent themselves, to turn scars into lessons, and to find, even in the darkest moments, the certainty that brighter days will always come. After years of a routine that slowly became my fortress, I had learned to transform pain into wisdom and to build through great effort a refuge of affection and understanding within the asylum. The environment, once cold and lonely, was now filled with the presence of dear friends, shared stories, and small gestures that renewed my hope. Every morning, I devoted time to walks in the gardens where the colorful flowers reminded me that beauty can emerge even after the harshest emotional storms. The afternoons were filled with honest conversations where each laugh was a balm for the soul, and every memory, no matter how painful, served as a lesson for a lighter future. It was in this new rhythm of life that I began to believe almost shyly that time could heal wounds that once seemed impossible to mend. Yet fate, with its unpredictable way of catching us off guard, decided to confront me with what I had so desperately tried to leave behind. On a quiet morning, as the sun shyly peeked through the cafeteria windows, I was taken aback by the unexpected arrival of a man who, at first glance, seemed familiar but carried an urgent air. My heart pounded as I recognized features I had long hoped never to see again. It was my son. The person who once meant the world to me now stood before me, his eyes filled with intentions I could barely understand. He approached cautiously, but his anxious expression was unmistakable. His first words were hesitant, as if he feared reopening wounds from a past I had tried to bury. Yet he did not hesitate to reveal his intentions. He spoke in terms of money, making requests that felt as though a lifetime of love and sacrifice had been reduced to a financial matter. The abruptness and coldness of his demands struck me like a blast of icy wind, reopening old pains and raw wounds. As he laid out his reasons and justified his plea with arguments mixed with ambition, I found myself overwhelmed by a storm of emotions. I remembered the days when his smiles filled my soul, the moments when his innocent gaze made me believe nothing could ever break the bond between us. But the reality of recent years had taught me that affection doesn't always survive the choices and distances that time imposes. The betrayal I felt, the abandonment and rejection that forced me to live apart, all of it now replayed in front of me as if the past was haunting me. In a silence heavy with pain, I listened to his words. Each one carried a coldness that sharply contrasted with the tenderness of days gone by. He made no mention of the time we spent together or the sacrifices I had made to offer him opportunities I never had. Everything was reduced to a need for money, an amount he claimed was crucial to solve problems that now seemed insignificant compared to what we had shared. In my new reality, the request was not just a material demand, but an attempt to reopen wounds I had fought so hard to heal. Tears began to form stubbornly, but they were not tears of despair. Rather, they came from a deep sadness, born from a disappointment that had lingered for decades. My heart, which had learned to beat strongly even in the face of abandonment, refused to accept that the child who had once been my greatest love could reduce our past to numbers and calculations. In that moment, I knew that to preserve the dignity of everything I had built, I could not give in to that demand. It was a decision that required courage and the strength I had gathered over many days of struggle and overcoming. With a voice both choked and firm, I replied that the money could not be given. I explained that although life had taken us down different paths, the sincere affection and the value of all our shared history could never be bought or sold. It was a moment of confrontation, not just with him, but with everything that symbolized the betrayal of the past. My words reflected a soul that had already rebuilt itself, and even when faced with old wounds, refused to be conquered by an ambition that wasn't worth the price of my love. As he left, his eyes revealed a mix of surprise and bitterness, but I was already resolved not to let that episode dim the light I had managed to rekindle. In the silence that followed, I felt a mixture of relief and sadness. Relief for having stayed true to myself and my story, and sadness in seeing that despite everything, the ties of the past still carried so many scars. That episode became a turning point, a moment that strengthened my belief that true healing doesn't come from forced reconciliation, but from reclaiming one's essence and self-love. After that encounter, I returned to my work at the nursing home with renewed energy. My friend, who had always been by my side so kindly and who, with her gentle gaze, reminded me of the tenderness I once shared with my daughter, approached me and offered words of support. We sat together for long minutes, sharing silence and mutual understanding. And there, in that environment that had become a true home, I found comfort in knowing that although the past can never be completely erased, it's possible to build a future where happiness grows from inner strength. I began dedicating myself even more to the small activities that brought me joy, reading poems that celebrated human resilience, attending craft workshops where my creativity could flourish, and most importantly, sharing experiences with the other residents. Every new story or piece of advice was like a brick in constructing a renewed path where pain was just part of the journey, not the final destination. The care home became a space where, amid laughter and tears, I rediscovered the value of each moment and the importance of staying true to my own identity. Over time, I realized that refusing to give in to the pressure of the past had granted me a freedom I never imagined I'd feel again. I transformed from an experience of abandonment and betrayal into a woman who knew how to recognize her own worth and fight for a life that, though marked by loss, was filled with possibilities for love and happiness. That episode with my son became a lesson, a milestone showing me that true affection cannot be demanded but must be offered with an open heart without conditions or material expectations. Today, looking back, I see that my reunion with my son, despite all his misguided intentions, was a necessary step in solidifying my new identity. The money he so desperately wanted became a symbol of a past that, no matter how painful, could no longer dictate the course of my life. My decision to reject what did not align with the true essence of love was the first step toward ending an era of suffering and beginning a new phase. Freedom and self-respect are the pillars supporting every decision. And so, with a heart healed by new friendships and the certainty that life always offers second chances, I continue my journey. Each dawn is an invitation to start over, to write new chapters with ink made of courage and hope. My past, with all its scars, is no longer an anchor holding me back, but rather the solid foundation upon which I've built a future filled with true love, one defined not by numbers, but by the genuine feelings that connect us. In this place of renewal, I've learned that even when facing adversity and painful reunions, inner strength can turn what once seemed like an end into a magnificent new beginning. And it's with this sense of gratitude and resilience that I invite all of you to reflect on the importance of staying true to yourselves, even when the world seems to pull us away from the path of love and dignity. After all, every challenge is an opportunity for growth, and no matter how deep the pain of the past, it can never overshadow the light shining within each of us. Dear friends, we've reached the end of this journey. I sincerely thank each of you for your attention and kindness. I hope my story of overcoming inspires you to face challenges with courage and love. Please don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel to discover more stories about turning pain into strength. Thank you so much, and see you in the next video.